record. Okie dokie. Tonight we're doing urban fantasy, and half the folks here at least are familiar with that. And if you see this recording in the future, you may be as well. But what we're going to do is just kind of go over the basics of it for those who are less familiar, and maybe correct some misconceptions, possibly, of folks who feel they do know it. I selected my source from the Writer's Digest, new, let's say, I think it's the March, April edition. But there's an article in here by a fellow by the name of Michael LaRon. And during the follow-up to reading his article, when I went to his website and I went all over the place, and I wish Eric Schubaugh was here. Eric is such a great marketer, but I could not believe what a tight ship and what a great marketer this guy is. If you saw his website and the way he's laid out, okay, and it says on there in one place that I looked, he's put out 80 books. Not all of them have been urban fantasy, some more just sci-fi, a couple of others, a lot of series. And he's also written a whole series, probably 20 or so books for writers on different topics. So that's on his page. What I did over here, if you can see the chat, I typed in his website, Michael LaRon, and then I typed in a couple of other things that he had here. Let's see here. Oh, it's something called authorlevelup.com. He's as bad as I am. I could swear this is another of his own sites. So I think that authorlevelup.com is its own thing, but his WD Urban Fantasy, I think that's him. And you just have to go there on your own, because I can't even begin to tell you all the stuff he has. It's extremely helpful. The man knows what he's talking about. I could tell just by perusing all this. He has his own podcast. He's got 50,000 followers. He's put out 80 books. He says he has now published 3.5 million words. So he's prolific. And then another thing that he listed there was something called Kalytics.com. And from what I can see, it doesn't say anywhere Amazon, but I think that is, what are they called again? Kindle. Yeah, I think that's Kindlytics, because all throughout I was talking about how many Kindle sales there were of this and of that. But it's way too pricey for me. So you're not going to get any of that from me, because the cheapest thing on there, the basic thing, is $47 a month. And I'm sorry, I got to pay my rent. So, yeah. But you may feel comfortable. Daniel, were you nothing on chat yet? Really? It's there. I'm looking at it. Did you
Linda, they're not going to see it if they came in after you put it on. So you might have to repeat it.
Repeat it? Oh, crying up a crick. Okay. Let's just do that.
I put it up too.
What?
I found it. I put it up there. If anybody can see it.
Oh, thanks. There, you got Michael's, and then there's that second one, the Author Level Up. You could put that one for me if you would, James. You see that one?
Well, what's it called?
Authorlevelup.com. It's not.
I just put it.
You just put it?
Okay. There we are.
Oh, great. You put up the link. Good for you. And then there's a third one, the Kalytics.com. And that's the Kindlytics. It's amazing what they've got. All the figures of all the subcategories. If you want to go up that high, if you want to pay $197 a month, you can get. Excuse me. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so for tonight, we're talking urban fantasy, and like I said, I really like this guy's explanation of it. And he basically has something that he, whoops, come back here. I don't want full screen. Okay. He basically has, well, I'll just go ahead and share the screen, and then we'll see it. Just right there. Okay. Um, I know I'm sharing. Get off my screen. Goofy thing. Here, I'll put this down here farther. Um, he has what he calls the urban fantasy equation. And it's these 7 different things that he believes and is supported by his experience and the data he's collected and surveys and everything. What you need to have, you know, to be really urban fantasy. Now, you may not want to have one of these things, but generally speaking, this is what your readers are looking for. And as we've mentioned before, if you want a reader to be happy with you, then you must give them what they expect. They're going to want certain elements, and if those things aren't there, then they're going to say, this isn't perfect. I don't like this guy. So be careful. First is that it's usually a city setting. Now, that's why it's urban, of course. But sometimes there are people now branching out, he says, and doing rural settings. They're looking at suburban settings. So it's spreading out a little bit. But in general, readers expect this to take place in a city. And I know one of the series that I've always really liked is the Jim Butcher series about kind of, well, I won't get into it, but it's a wonderful series. But then on top of that, usually there is a certain amount of magic that is incorporated in urban fantasy. So it may be mild magic, it may be something that's just sort of, maybe a person is able to, you know, conjure their dinner. No, maybe they're able to, I have food on the brain here. Anyway, they do minor magic things, and sometimes the magic is very strong. There's a lot of it. So it just depends kind of on which way you're leaning. What's your main point of your book? Because urban fantasy can be, usually, he's got on here too, you might put some romance in there, but normally you won't have that. You'll have a little bit of romance if there's, you know, characters for which for whom that suits the story. And but it's going to be a minor thing. It won't be the main thrust. The main thrust is fantasy. Let's see. Usually there's a hero with supernatural powers. Okay, they are the ones able to do something. Maybe in one story they're able to walk through walls, or maybe they're able to read the mind of animals. Or I'm just throwing things in here. It doesn't mean that this is, I'm sure the basic ideas that people come up with bestsellers are much better than that, but those are the kinds of things. So they have some kind of power. Frequently, they're trying to keep that hidden. They don't want anybody else to know about it. So it's kind of like, yes, I can see through your clothes, but no, I can walk through walls, but I'm not going to let anybody catch me. Okay. Then frequently in these stories, it'll involve a secret world. Now, that's the kind of thing where maybe up on the 5th floor in an office building, there's a certain place where you can go and you can walk through to another world. A world where things are totally different. Different people live there. They have, you know, totally different. Maybe there's dragons over there. It's like in some of the movies that we've had where people maybe go into a cave. Well, that's an example, although it's not quite the same. but they'll go into the cave and they go through and then they come out on a shelf and realize there's this hidden world with dinosaurs and all that. You know, that's the way they used to do this kind of stuff. But it's become popular now to actually have to step into another dimension or totally a different world. And usually within these stories, there will be supernatural creatures. You know, that might be dragons, or it could be an animal that could talk and is supposed to, like Jerry's parrot. No, he's not. Forgive me for that. But you know, they have, they're animals you wouldn't expect to see here, and they have unusual things about them. So those are the basic areas that's covered. What I was fascinated to see when he was talking about the heroes in the stories is he describes them. Usually the hero will have a unique occupation. And I'm going to put some lotion on my nose because it's itching like crazy. Must be allergic to the dragons and stuff. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't mean to be obnoxious. So, but he says, actually, if the lead character is a detective, for instance, then what you're looking at is urban fantasy mystery. Because, so, you know, Jan, if you are interested in maybe doing some urban fantasy, you could do a mystery, or you could fiddle in a little romance or something because you've got that kind of background. But if the hero is in high school, then you're likely looking at a young adult urban fantasy, okay, as a subgenre of this subgenre of fantasy. So it just keeps stair-stepping down. There's history, urban fantasy, things that maybe take place in London, for instance, around the time of Jack the Ripper, and maybe dragons show up, or vampires, or, you know, who knows what. So it just has to flesh out with the qualities of urban fantasy. Then there's post-apocalyptic urban fantasy, frequently, and cozy mystery urban fantasy, and a whole bunch of others. So if you have a particular thing you like to write about, you might consider doing something that's got that in it, but is also meets the urban fantasy equation. So that is, share. That's all I have for notes for tonight. So I'm kind of interested in whether or not you're familiar with these, if you've read any urban fantasy, or what do you think of it? If you've heard about it, do you think it's a worthy kind of topic for genre for books, or do you think it's stupid? I guess we shouldn't say it's stupid. It's recording this for posterity, but
I think it's probably just a different flavor. You know, some people have different things that they're interested in. So it's just a different type of story. And I personally, I'm not crazy. I've read some of them, they're okay, but I haven't really been crazy about them. I'm more of a classical fantasy. But yeah, I don't see any problem with them. It's just a different type of read. You know, some people like mysteries, and some people like fantasies, some people like westerns, and so on. So I just think it's just a different type of area, and I didn't see any issues with them.
What we'd have to do with your book, Jay, your series, I should say, is we'd have to have you take the people from the plane where they're usually doing the action, move them to a city of some sort in your world that you built, make a city, maybe introduce a dragon, you know, have that come flying in and scare the badoodles. Jonathan's laughing because she's read it. She's going, yeah. Yeah, it would be different. But I'm just saying, you can throw in some of these things. Of course, people would think you were nuts, but otherwise, otherwise, it should be kind of fun. I got a new message over here. What's this? Lona Andrews has a great. Where do you find um her? Is it a woman, Lona?
They're actually, it's a husband and wife team, and
Oh,
they've made several urban fantasy series.
uh-huh.
I like them because they're a little bit more, I don't know, they have a little bit more, like a little bit of touch of romance in them and stuff, but they're talking about other things, like they're like, she has a conflict with her dad, and there's just different. I guess it's because I like them because there's touches of other genres kind of mixed in. And like it's post-apocalyptic, which is what I'm writing. But it's a magic, they say it's a magic post-apop, can't say, you know what I mean.
That's a mouth.
Post-apocalypse kind of scene setting, and it's really, the way they write it is very kind of a little bit more fast-paced. I like my story is a little bit more fast.
Yeah, there's been quite a bunch of rather big honking books. I'm trying to think. Cronin is somebody that's written the big books. They'll do a thing. They'll have not necessarily magic, but they will have it's after an apocalypse. It's they have a young character, and that young character is going to save the day, and usually frequently it's a young girl, and she has some kind of supernatural ability, usually might be mind reading or able to sort of sense the future, things like that. There may be a little magic in it. That's not typical, because these other things are extensions of what we think of right now as people having extrasensory perception and things of that sort. So it kind of gets, but there are some remarkable, beautiful, huge books that are, you can just sit there and read to your heart's content. They tell really strong stories. And I think I haven't seen as many new ones coming out now so far this year. So I'm not sure if that's a reflection on a shift in what's being released or what. Does anybody else have any?
I think the genre has kind of been flooded lately, and so I think it's kind of shifting. Because if you go on to sacrilege, no, Amazon, they have there's a lot of them. There's a lot of authors who are writing urban fantasy on there with differing degrees of popularity, but I've read Jim Butcher before. He's really good. I like his. I like it. There's only certain authors that I enjoy who write it well, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah. If the writing is really strong, then I'm more to enjoy it.
Because it's really easy, I think, to make it almost cheesy. I mean, I hate to say that, but
yeah.
So because you're talking about, mystical creatures and whatnot. I mean,
yeah,
you don't make them sound at least somewhat realistic, then I kind of lose the reader.
It might, like, sometimes the supernatural character is a golem. And that's got his history. It's got a background with the Jewish community, golems, and so sometimes the character or the supernatural being will be a little, it'll be linked to history and myth, and so it seems, we have a tendency, I think, frequently to think, okay, well, if it's mythical and it's not a strong connection for people's myth, then it seems like it could be more realistic. Like, well, maybe this is possible, And Jerry says here he noticed that he connects this with comic books like Spider-Man,
Yeah.
And I would agree that it's probably about half.
Mhm.
Because it does take place usually in a big city. It's got a person with
Yeah.
supernatural powers, but I don't think he's magic. I don't think he uses magic usually. Um, and so there's a person who was a true urban fantasy fan would probably say, well, I really enjoy these, but it's not quite what urban fantasy is to me. So,
Mhm.
as he said, they really need to have all 7 of those things, or at least 6 of them,
Yeah.
to be urban fantasy.
And
But
my
Could you see that page again so I can see that again?
which,
Could I see that page again? Sorry for interrupting, Denise.
oh, the pit,
oh, you're fine.
you
Yeah,
want me to
I'm
share
still trying to get my head around exactly what it is.
um, this one, this page, or are you talking about my list?
Yeah, the little page you showed that defined what urban
Oh,
fantasy
yeah,
was.
yeah, got it.
Right.
Have to do a share, and I could do that. I know how to do this.
There we
you
go.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I made it so big. Okay.
Woohoo. That's good.
And you can fit so many things within it. Like, so I have a novelette series that's contemporary fantasy. It's not true urban fantasy because it's like the first book is set out in the mountains, but they have I have Sasquatch in it. And so you could probably, I don't know, market it as such as urban fantasy maybe, but I don't know. A lot of what I've read would be the post-apocalyptic urban fantasy, but this Lana Andrews series, they have some of the historical, some really, they tie in his history really well. I think it's probably why it's more interesting. So I don't know.
Do you need me to lead this up further, Daniel, or? I can't hear you because you're numbed.
Sorry about that. I pretty well have it. I was thinking how this related to Dean Koontz's Dragon Tears, which
Mhm.
has a golem as a bad guy, but the heroes don't have. No, there's 3 of them or 4 of them actually, but none of them have supernatural powers.
Well,
Isn't Dean Koontz the one that wrote it's more horror though, I think. Oh gosh. Quicksilver. It was some Odd Thomas. That's
Odd
what
Thomas, yes.
yeah.
yeah, you're looking for an ability to use magic, which so some of the witchcraft books,
Mm-hmm.
if they're leaning heavily on that, would be that way. And some of the books that have been put out by authors are kind of a mishmash of a lot of things. They'll bring in witches, they'll put them in a historical setting. Usually, frequently, they'll put them in an alternate universe, one that we've never seen. Sometimes they take place in both the city and in the country because the characters are wandering about. They will come up against monsters or supernatural creatures. Um, and sometimes they end up finding out that there's this whole other secret world going on that they did. So they can have a lot of the same factors in them. Sometimes they would be called urban fantasy if they really, really lean in that direction. If they go too far in just have little elements of that and then go very strongly toward, like for instance, if they went strongly and made it a romance between characters and that was the story was just a backup, then it would be a romance, a romantic fantasy or wow, that sounds romantic. I like anyway. But if they are real heavy on the urban aspect, the magic, the supernatural critters, the secret world, and all of that, then And sometimes you'll see some of this in science fiction.
Mhm.
Because they're doing that. Maybe they go to a different planet, and on that planet there's a city, and they find people who are able to do magic, and they what have you, and yet they've gone off world. And so sometimes you'll run into that too, where it seems like there's a crossover. And,
Yeah.
um,
Now there's another author. She's actually from Benton City. That's pretty popular. I can't remember. I'm looking in my library. I can't remember her name, but I think I don't know if hers is considered urban fantasy or if it's considered like paranormal romance, but it's not really romance. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it really it has all those other elements? What is her name? It's like right on the tip of my tongue. Patricia Briggs.
yeah, she's been to the store in the past. Patricia Briggs. She's quite a good
Yeah.
author. Yeah, I like Patty. Nice gal.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know what hers would be considered though. Is it urban
I
fantasy?
wouldn't think of it typically
Or
in fantasy because typically it's what would you call it? It's almost a prehistory. I mean, it's not modern. It's like
Mhm.
back, and the people meet around they'll have to have so many people, and they can have a meeting around a fire, and then they can do
Mhm.
magic and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I'd be curious to look. One of the things that I can do when I go on Edelweiss, which is where I place reviews or do orders, and I
Mhm.
can look at the book, and usually they've classified it in some manner
Yeah.
that what kind of book it is. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever seen one of them classified as urban fantasy. I think they're
I
usually
don't know if it's like some of her book, is paranormal romance, maybe.
uh-huh. There is
Would that be?
paranormal romance. That's one that's typical. I think that's what some of what Carrie was doing when she came to the book club um, early in the month and did her book.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I kind of think of urban fantasy in my head. It may be simplistic, but it seems to be fantasy that's set in the real world.
Mhm.
Like, so you've got
There's a hidden world.
grocery stores and taxis, and it's
Yeah.
finding magic in the real world.
Yeah.
Although I would not characterize the Harry Potter series, which is in the real world, as urban fantasy, but
No.
it seems to have that flavor to it. And then other kinds of fantasy are not in the recognizably real world because
Mhm.
they've created other worlds.
mhm.
And it seems like a main staple, they'll have vampires of some kind or werewolves or, witches or whatever.
Elves and or stuff.
Yeah, and mythical creatures, of all sorts.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm. Absolutely. That was a good. I don't know. I read everything, so I get on kicks where I'll stick to one genre for a while and then,
Yeah.
flip genres and find a really good author and then want to read that genre for a while. So
Yeah.
I read everything.
Before I forget it, Janet, I am going to try to do your book, so to review it. I was telling people earlier, if I review one for somebody, I'm going to do Jerry's. If I do one, I'm going to end up with everybody.
She said she would do all of us.
Yeah. I will set aside an entire month, and I will do nothing but no, I can't do that. Anyway, I'll try my darndest. Okay, so what else can we say about this topic? Anything? And if not, we could move on to whatever it is you'd like to talk about. How's that sound?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What are people's favorite urban fantasy books, novels? I would like to know. I've read the Jim Butcher's ones, and of
Mhm.
course, but what are your favorites? What are some suggestions if I wanted to read more of that genre?
My particular one was West Side, and I love that. And it, but
Who was
it's
it by, who was it by? Was it by the guy up here? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
Aileron.
let me see here. What I'll put it in
Okay.
my thing. Yeah. Let's see if they're gonna have it. West Side Story, no. I don't want West Side Story. I'm not even sure they're gonna list it here. Let's see. They're so enamored of West Side Story, they don't know if anything else exists. Golly Moses. Let me see. If I go to Auntie's, they may have it. It's been so many years that it's probably disappeared right off the West Side Story. Good grief. Can't find it. You guys go ahead and talk. And I think I've got it on my file over here, so I will see what I can find, okay? Go ahead.
So I shared a link in the chat for an author named Nicole Gallen that I've enjoyed. She wrote one book. It was co-authored with a guy named Neil Stevenson, who's fairly well known, but more for science fiction and speculative fiction and stuff like that. So then they're kind of, I don't think they're completely, these Gallen novels aren't completely urban fiction. They just have touches of it. It's kind of, the gist is that there's like, witches used to be a real thing with regular power, but then their magical power declined with the rise of technology. And then people figure out time travel. So there's like witches that want to go back in time to prevent technological things from happening. But there's also people who are like, whoa, this is going to be like not people, but like non-witches, but regular people. And they're like, so it's kind of, they're chasing each other through time. And the urban parts of it are London at the time of Shakespeare. So, and like ancient Rome, stuff like that. So there's, or like, Salem, Massachusetts in the early 1600s. So, so it kind of, I think, touches a little bit on urban fiction, but it's not modern by any means. Some of it, it's kind of different genres all mashed up together. I thought it was great.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for continuing the conversation. Perfect. Well, 2019, from this one, this is what it was called. And I really like, I know of two, and it says, so this is an example of a mystery or urban fantasy. And it says a tiny mystery, infinite darkness. And the reason it's a tiny mystery is the gal in this. People are always hitting her up to help them solve little problems. She only takes on tiny mysteries. She won't take on big things like murders or big thefts. Just tiny things like I lost my gloves, I don't know where, and stuff like that. And then she gets pulled into some serious stuff in the thing. But it's called a mystery steeped in the supernatural and shot through with gunfight, rot gut whiskey, and sizzling Dixieland jazz. And it's touch of romance, not a lot, just a little bit of a couple of characters. Another world to go through, that particular, for some reason, Akers, she did two books that I'm aware of. And this reminds me, I need to go back to see if she's done anything else. But like that. And people wrote some other things in here. I better write that one in. West Side. Bye.
So Anna, I don't even know if I'm going to say her name right. Anna Gary, Agary. I think it's more like angels and demons type of. I don't know if that would be considered urban fantasy.
You know, my best guess would be Anne Aguirre.
Aguirre. Okay, I'm horrible sometimes with names.
Yeah, I have the same problem, but I've seen something similar to that not too far back, and that's how it was pronounced by them. So,
And Robert J. Crane. It's pretty good.
thank you. I'll have to look them up because, you know, I want to see if there's even more that I haven't read.
Yeah, I've written down these other ones as well.
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere is a good one.
Uh-huh. So has anyone here will lay claim to having written? Denise, you said you wrote some urban fiction?
I think it's, yeah, contemporary. I think it probably, some of it borders on urban maybe. But I don't get into like the vampires and the werewolves and whatnot. It's just,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I'm not.
it's a
Not
little
much
bit different, you know?
I think
There's novelettes.
something is related that comes out in movies all the time, the underworld, and I think that is not
Mhm.
fantasy, but it's historical. If you could do well, can't even do that. What would you call it? It's the
I don't know, like contemporary fantasy. I mean, they're going towards that with some things as well.
vampires versus the werewolves, and you know, they make all these movies out of them, which I love. And
Mhm.
yeah. You know, I think that's one of the primary things that will grab me is if the writing is really good. You know,
Mhm.
this almost never happens to me. I was just sent an arc today by a book or by a publisher, and I got it. And I opened it up, and usually when I get these books, because they're coming all the time on the courts, and I don't have time, so I just open it up and I go, oh, what's this about? And I started reading the first page, and I couldn't stop. I mean, and I think that hasn't happened to me for years. And
What was the book?
Yeah.
yeah, it's gosh. It's called Profit.
Profit.
Yeah. And it will come out, I think, tentatively scheduled for August 8th. So I could not believe it. It's by two people. Oh, and Helen McDonald, who was the author of H's for Hawk, which was a big book. So
Helen McDonald has seen bunch.
yeah, and it's two authors. So
Nice.
sure, I and the little sub catcher is your happiest memory is their deadliest weapon. Now, whoa. But when I started reading it, I was like, and here's the line in the front, but you know how you pull, I don't think what they're called, but you pull a little saying and stick it in. And this one says it's by a David Graeber, and it says the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently. And it was like, whoa, it kind of had me from there. So I had to turn the page and start reading, and that did it. So I don't read just urban fantasy, mind you, but anywho. Let's see. What is it? We got another 15 minutes if you wish. Is there another genre that you feel is, I mean, okay, why don't we talk about this whole concept of genres. I mean, the publishing industry obviously has gotten huge. You've got bookstores that are trying to figure out what shelf things go on, and they need somebody because they're not the store itself. The staff aren't going to read every book that comes in, so somebody has to tell them what kind of book it is. So they know where to put it, and sometimes they'll pull a book off a shelf, and you'll go, "Wait a minute, this should be over in," because you disagree with where what do you think of that whole? Do you think people ought to just look at the covers and then pick what they want, or look at the blurb on the back, or you think books, if they were just throughout the store, you'd have nonfiction and fiction, put them all together with by author or what have you, and don't be telling people what kind of book it is, and sort of prejudicing their thought, and just let them pick whatever book looks good? Or do you think that the classifications really serve a good purpose?
I don't know.
Right.
That's an interesting,
Hmm.
interesting idea. Because a lot of people that I know write, they talk about writing to market, like who are going, especially who are indie authors, you know? So it's almost like they need that to kind of guide a reader's decision. I don't know, but that's an interesting thought. Just go put everything out, and it's like
I think
free.
it started out with the library systems. They had to classify everything, so they go with that.
I mean, I know if I walked into the library and it was fiction and non, just like general, I would be a bit lost. I think it gets really hard when you're doing sub-genres and sub-sub-genres and sub-sub, because those cross over. But if you had at least big things like mystery or fantasy or
Mhm.
and it's hard to figure out what are the big categories, but that would at least put me in the right corner of the library instead of realizing,
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times we go in there, we don't have a whole lot of time. I mean,
Right.
So
and
it's
you,
time saving.
yeah,
Yeah.
It may keep you from discovering other books that you didn't know existed that you might have liked. But most of us are in a time crunch anymore. So it is one way, like you say, to guide. The publishers certainly want to do that because they know they're after a certain audience and they want those people to buy. And I don't think there's as much concern about reaching new readers. I think one of the things that we might be struggling with these days is, how do you tell your customers when they come in? How do you display something that says, if you like this kind of thing, be sure and check this, and this, because, I mean, we have authors that we try to at Auntie's, they try to put the same books by a given author in a certain section. So if an author, a big author who's already made their name in a certain area, a certain genre, if they start off a little bit and they go in a different direction, then we're stuck with this. Well, most people are going to be looking for so-and-so's books where the other person's books, where their books are. And so we don't want to put their new book over here in this other section. Nobody's going to see it because they won't know it's there. So there's this, we don't have the luxury like a library has, for instance, where people can just walk up and enter the author's name and then say, they're here and here and here, which we have at the stores. It's called a sales clerk, and they can look it up on the computer, but a lot of people don't want to bother them, or if they're busy with customers and there's no time, so for me, that's always kind of an issue. How do you
Mhm.
I'm interested in getting books into the hands of people I think will want to read them. And that's supposedly one of the things about a bookstore as opposed to online, is that you can go to somebody there and say, I'm interested in this kind of stuff. What would you suggest? And usually, if that staff person doesn't know that area, they usually know somebody in the store who does. And they'll say, George, get over here. This person is interested in blah, blah, blah. So, but now it's gotten to the point where that was real handy back when you had fiction and maybe you had historical fiction, you had um, uh, classical fiction, and you had modern life, whatever. And people, it was pretty easy. You just went to that section. If you're interested in historical fiction, you went to that. So now it's all fiction and it's all sci-fi fantasy. And then horror does have its own little slot because nobody wants to send anybody to face any of those books if they're not expecting them.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So true. I thought I was.
Oops. But it's become much more difficult, I think, to find those books. And that, of course, is why I suppose people like me, we do a lot of reviews and try to come out with those and say, this is sort of like this or sort of like that. You get a sense of what it is. But if you ever come up with a really, really bright idea on how to help customers know what to look for, and you can't put the BISOC is pages and pages of categories. There's no way you can't put people would be what like this on the list. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, a little
I-
computer screen that you could walk up to and type in something there that it's only goes to the store instead of like a card reader that they used to have.
yeah.
I mean, going to hard files that you sometimes you look under, but if you could do like in the base library, they would have a little computer you could get onto and you could do your searches there.
Yeah. And that's been contemplated in stores, but
Mm.
I have two issues. And one is that it has to be updated daily with the ins and the outs, what exists and what doesn't exist. And the other is that you have friendly people who like to go in and screw with your database. And so it becomes very dangerous to let anybody have that kind of access.
I know even with the library trying to find if I like an author, another author, I do the Goodreads, which is hard to do in a store, but I remember going into Auntie's and they'd had these wonderful like staff picks or staff reviews, and then there would be it was short, sweet. You were in the section you wanted, you knew an author you wanted, and it listed like 5 or 6 other authors to look for or something. But it just was a nice. I always like staff picks because even in the library when they have staff picks, because that gives that kind of personal recommendation that you really like from the brick and mortar stores. And then if there's some way to do an abbreviated Goodreads, if you like this author, try these 3 or something, it just begins to bring me in, and then I'm more willing to like browse the shelves and spend more time.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's just
we
a
have
suggestion.
we have a number of places in the store where there are, I mean, sometimes on the tables and that there's displays of a topic and all there are just what it is, the books themselves. But there are a number of areas with the shelves where the staff picks are. And in the window up front now, they've taken the handwriting. Now, I don't like that because I can't read their handwriting and I'm looking through the window at the thing going, what? But you can't really, touch it. It's in the display. But on the shelves in the store, there's areas which are local authors, staff picks, and stuff like that, staff favorites. And those books will have just a shelf, what's called a shelf talker, and it hangs down and it tells you like a little bit about the book. Usually we don't reference other authors though, so that might be a really good idea to do to try some kind of notification that says if you like this author, you might like. I think we just expect people to ask the staff, I really like this, and we don't even have something up that though that says if you like this author, ask a staff person for other suggestions.
Yeah,
That
because
would
I
be best.
I don't think about asking staff people for anything except checkout.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't need to be a huge extensive, just, you know, a tidbit or two.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I have, it's amazing how hard it is just to keep up with all the changes and the new subgenres everybody's coming out with, and I don't like being surprised too much. Some things don't bother me, but other things, if I'm expecting a certain kind of read, and that's what the whole point of this is you want, if you're claiming to be a certain type of book, then you should deliver what that reader is expecting.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're going to be angry or disappointed or both, you know. So
Sometimes you could be surprised. You just like, wow, that was something off the wall. Of course, that depends on the reader. The one that surprised me the most was David Weber's Out of the Darkness. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Mhm.
It's military sci-fi battles that are going on up in there. It's all science fiction. Till the very end, someone walks in. They're in Carpathia. And
Yeah.
suddenly some vampire comes to the rescue.
Wow.
They have nothing in there in the whole
That's amazing.
3/4 of the first book. There's nothing in there like that at all.
Wow. My one of the things that I loved to read 30, 40 years ago was hard sci-fi. And it's almost always involved an invasion, and the military had to fight off the aliens and all
Wow.
that. And then from there, we moved away from invading Earth, and we moved towards books about going to and discovering other planets and other peoples and stuff in other places. So I was such a sci-fi fan. Whoa. I had to have boxes full of pocketbooks in here. I still haven't collected. They're probably worth a mint now, but they're in my closet. But yeah, it's amazing the trends that you get. And sometimes the trend brings out some things you're gonna like, and sometimes it's like all the type of stuff you liked disappeared. And you know what happened. And now you're really struggling to find something new that you can enjoy. So
Yeah. There's an author, Erica Johansson. She wrote The Queen of the Tierling. And this book, have you heard of it?
Yeah.
It starts out and it sounds like it's going to be like a typical, like maybe fairy tale fantasy type of book. And then all of a sudden it turns gears into this dystopian future. And you're like, what? How in the world is she going to tie those two things together? Crazy thing, but it really sucked me in. It's a really good book.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really bring up because it used to be most fantasy involved, it was like fairy tales. You know, the classic, and it really wasn't urban. Usually it was country fantasy. But you know, where did all the fairies and the Tinkerbells and everybody go? They all disappeared. Instead, we have dragons and Bigfoots, and you know, stuff just disappears on you.
Typical fairy tale.
Yeah. Well, gang, we're just a titch over 8 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you away from your, dinner and evening plans. But I've enjoyed our conversation. I do want to tell you that I'm starting I'm always starting something, right? I'm starting it's called Discovery, a book club and salon. And it's going to be kind of have different things on it. Once in a while I get a national author that wants to meet with readers. And so I've got one who wants to come in. Probably I'll bring her in maybe in August. But the salon part, if you're familiar with the term salon, you know what they used to do. People would all go to somebody's house and they'd have cocktails and they'd talk about an idea.
And they get mani-pedis?
What?
And they get mani-pedis?
Mani-pedis? What?
Manicures and pedicures at the salon?
I don't know from that stuff. What are you talking about, Dan? It's a different kind of salon.
Different kind, yes.
So not Jonathan's.
No. It's for, John. But I'm hoping to do that, and I would love to have folks who want to talk and have a civil conversation about an idea and don't want to bark at each other and argue, because I'm not into that. So that's going to be starting in June. It'll be on the second Thursday of each month at 2:00. So, and in August, if she can make it, July or August, I'm going to have her. This is a wonderful book. Straight fiction, sort of more literary than it is, but it takes place in Maine. So I didn't really feel like I could have her at the local authors book group because she's not exactly local. So, but I'm hoping to have Alice here. I reviewed her book when it came out in hardback last year, and now it's in softback, and really, really good one. And it's kind of got an environmental flavor to it because it's two women who are friends, and one of them wants to save this 5,000 acres of this peninsula, and she tries to get her friend who owns the land, I think, to preserve it and stuff. But her friend has grown up adult children, and let's just say they don't agree. And so it's one of those kind of stories, but it's so well written, and I'm hoping she'll be able to come and talk. So you may hear about that at some point. In the meanwhile, if you have any good topics you might want to have discussed, shoot them to me, because now that I've got this thing set up to do, I'm going, oh dear, what can I thought about starting with one about, what is the value of books? I think that would make a good discussion. I mean, we just sort of take it for granted that books are important. Why? Now, especially now with all the technology and the changes. And then I think I'm put down for next month, did I, for the guild, is it the AI meeting about artificial intelligence? And that suddenly has become the big scary thing on the hill. So it's probably a good one to cover. And put on your thinking caps, because I want your opinions for that.
I'll send you an article I just read. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, cool.
Pretty
Thank
interesting
you.
opinion.
Yes. I
I'll
just
send
saw a discussion of it on MSNBC News. They had several people on and talking about it. And I think there's a lot of misconception. I'm a little bit savvy about what it is and how it functions. So I'm not as worried about it, because at this point, at least, it can produce writing, but it's based on writing that it's been fed into it. That's a simple way of putting it. AI has to learn, and the information it learns from, they may give it Jerry's book, they may give it Steve's book. Any books you have, they may enter those in the database. But generally speaking, the database that AI is using right now is social media, and I don't know if they use Wikipedia, if whatever. So long story short, AI regurgitates what it's been fed.
Yeah.
AI can't think in terms of it can count, it can sort, it can organize. It can bring together related ideas. It cannot understand. It does not know what the idea means. It doesn't know what humans feel, for instance. And so if it writes a book, it can pull ideas and statements and lines that it's been fed, but it doesn't, and even it can write a whole book, but it does not know what the book means. Now, yeah, so I'm not afraid of it because I think that the reader will recognize the lack of anything. I mean, to me, a book has to be well written, and that doesn't just mean good grammar or any of that. It means it has to be written with understanding. It has to show that it really gets the human condition and what we're all about and what's going on. And AI cannot do that because it doesn't even know what a human is.
Yeah, it can't do emotion.
Right. It just doesn't understand. And so it's good for maybe for if the person in the ad agency wants to just throw in a whole bunch of ideas and statements and then let their program scramble it and come up with something and see, but you know, and it may get better in the future. Somebody may figure out some way to get AI to feel, but I doubt it. There you are. Anyway, that's a little mini start to next time. Thank you all for being here.
You.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You guys,
Thanks, Linda. I'll look forward to the next one.
all right, send me ideas if you wanna. I'm up. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Linda. Bye.
Bye-bye.